It was 6 o'clock in the morning when the door to my room burst open. Not with a hand, with a foot. A sharp kick that made the wooden frame tremble and tore me from the only rest I'd managed all night. My eyes snapped open, my heart gave a violent leap inside my chest. For a second, I didn't know where I was. Then I remembered. I was in my son's house. In the back room. The smallest one. The one that used to be the laundry room. Madison entered like a storm. Her face was red, her eyes bright with rage, her loose hair falling over her shoulders. She was wearing a cream-colored silk robe that I myself had washed and ironed 2 days before. Her hands were on her hips, and her voice, that voice that never dropped in volume when she spoke to me, filled the entire room. "And so what if you cooked all night for my guests? Were you expecting a medal? You're tired." As if it was so hard to cook all night for my guests. And now, breakfast isn't even ready. And I sat up slowly in the bed. My back cracked. My knees protested. I was 63 years old and had just spent 8 hours on my feet in the kitchen preparing dishes I hadn't even tasted. Cocktail meatballs, spinach dip, chicken wings, potato salad, a 3-layer cake, everything Madison had ordered me to cook for her get-together with her friends. I had stayed awake until 4 o'clock in the morning, cleaning the dishes, drying the pots, leaving everything spotless. Then I had dragged myself to my room and collapsed on the bed without even taking off my apron. And now, 2 hours later, she was standing in front of me, screaming because I hadn't made breakfast. "Madison, I just lay down. I thought I could rest for a moment before." "Rest? Rest?" Her laugh was shrill, full of contempt. "What a way to exaggerate everything. Do you think I don't work? Do you think I don't get tired? But I don't stay in bed like a useless old woman. Hendesikst do." I lowered my gaze. My hands were trembling on the sheets. I felt the exhaustion like a stone weight in every muscle. But more than the physical tiredness, what hurt me was something else. Something that didn't have a name. Something that had been building up for months and now threatened to drown me. "I'm sorry. I'll get up right now and—" "I'm not interested in your apology. What I'm interested in is you doing what you're supposed to do. You live here for free, Eleanor. Free. The least you can do is pull your weight." Her screams echoed off the walls. I felt the air grow heavier. I wanted to say something. I wanted to remind her that I didn't live there for free, that every day I cleaned the entire house, that I washed her clothes, that I cooked for her and for my son, that I catered to her whims without complaining. But I said nothing, because I had learned that saying anything only made things worse. I got out of bed slowly. My bare feet touched the cold floor. Madison watched me from the doorway with her arms crossed, as if she were supervising to make sure I was actually moving, as if she didn't trust me to be capable of getting up on my own. "And one more thing," she said, lowering her voice slightly, but without losing that tone of contempt she always used with me. "My friends left a disaster in the living room. There were glasses everywhere, crumbs on the sofa, one of them spilled wine on the carpet. I want you to clean it all up before Ryan wakes up. I don't want him to see the mess." I nodded. Again, I always nodded. I always obeyed. I always swallowed the urge to scream, to cry, to ask her how I had ended up here, how I had ended up being treated like a servant in my own son's house. Madison turned and left the room without closing the door. Her footsteps faded down the hallway. I heard her enter her bedroom and close the door forcefully. Then, silence. I stood in the middle of my room, looking at the unmade bed, the apron still hanging from my waist, my wrinkled, tired hands. I wanted to sit down again. I wanted to close my eyes and disappear. But I knew I couldn't. Because if I didn't do what she said, she would come back, and she would scream louder. And maybe this time she would wake up Ryan. And then everything would be worse. I left my room and walked down the dim hallway. The house was silent. From the living room came a sour smell of spilled wine mixed with sweet perfume. I turned on the light, and what I saw broke my heart a little more. Dirty glasses everywhere. Plates with leftover food on the coffee table. Crumpled napkins on the floor. The carpet, the one I had cleaned myself just last week, had a dark red wine stain in the center. A large, deep stain. I took a deep breath. I went to get the bucket, the rags, the detergent. I knelt in front of the carpet and began to scrub. The cold water burned my hands. My knees ached against the hard floor. But I kept scrubbing, because that was what was expected of me. That was what I had to do to keep the peace, to not be a problem, to not be a burden. As I cleaned, I thought about how I had gotten here. I thought about my life before I moved into this house. I thought about my husband, who had died 5 years ago. I thought about the little house where we had lived together for more than 30 years. I thought about Ryan when he was a boy, how I had taken care of him, how I had worked day and night so he would never lack for anything, how I had sacrificed myself time and time again for him, for his education, for his future, for his happiness. And now I was here, kneeling in his living room, cleaning up his wife's mess, at 6 o'clock in the morning, having not slept, having not eaten, without anyone asking me how I was, without anyone saying thank you. I finished cleaning the living room when the clock struck 7:30 in the morning. My knees were burning. My hands smelled like detergent and sour wine. The stain on the carpet was lighter, but still noticeable. I knew Madison would complain anyway. She always found something to complain about. I stood up with difficulty and took the bucket to the laundry room. The dirty water swirled down the drain. I watched it for a moment, feeling like something inside of me was also going down that dark hole. But I didn't have time to think about that. I had to make breakfast. I had to have it ready before Ryan came down. Before Madison started screaming at me again, I went into the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. I took the eggs out of the refrigerator. Bread, butter, jam. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to be in its exact place. Because if something was missing, if something was out of place, Madison would notice, and then it would start all over again. As I was beating the eggs in a bowl, I heard footsteps upstairs. Ryan was awake. My heart shrank a little. There was a time when hearing my son's footsteps filled me with joy. When he was little, he would run through the house barefoot, and I would follow him, laughing, trying to catch him. Now, his footsteps only brought me anxiety, because I never knew what mood he'd be in. I never knew if he would talk to me like his mother or like a stranger invading his space. The footsteps came down the stairs. I held my breath. Ryan entered the kitchen with his hair messed up and his eyes puffy with sleep. He was wearing a white t-shirt and gray pajama pants. He looked at me for a second, just a quick glance, and then sat down at the table without saying anything. "Good morning, son," I said in a soft, almost timid voice. Was all he replied. I poured coffee into his favorite mug, the blue one with white stripes that he had picked out himself when he was 12 years old. I placed it in front of him along with the sugar and cream. Then I went back to the stove to finish the scrambled eggs. "Did you sleep well?" I asked, trying to start a conversation, trying to find even a small piece of the son I had raised. "Yeah," he said without looking at me. He took a sip of coffee and pulled his phone out of his pocket. The screen lit up, and his eyes fixed on it. I put the eggs on a plate, 2 slices of toast on the side, a little strawberry jam in a separate dish. I placed it in front of him carefully, as if I were serving a king. "Thanks," he muttered without looking up. I stood by the stove, watching him eat. I wanted to tell him so many things. I wanted to ask him what had happened to us. When had he stopped seeing me as his mother and started seeing me as a burden? I wanted to ask if he remembered all the times I had taken care of him when he was sick, all the nights I had stayed awake because he had a fever or nightmares, all the extra jobs I had taken to pay for his college. I wanted to ask if all of that had disappeared, if it didn't mean anything anymore. But I said nothing, because I knew it wouldn't do any good. Madison came into the kitchen a few minutes later. She was now wearing a pink tracksuit, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked fresh, rested, as if she hadn't spent the entire night sleeping while I worked. "Is my breakfast ready?" she asked without even greeting me. "Yes. I'll prepare something for you right now. I just want fruit, papaya, melon, and a yogurt, sugar-free, and a green tea, very hot." Of course. I moved quickly around the kitchen. I took the papaya from the refrigerator and began to peel it. My hands were shaking a little. Madison sat down next to Ryan and began talking to him in a low voice. I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but I caught a few stray words. "Your mother. All morning. Can't go on like this." I felt the air grow denser. I cut the fruit into perfect cubes. I placed them in a bowl. I added the melon, the yogurt. I prepared the green tea and let it steep for exactly 3 minutes, just as she liked it. I brought everything to the table and placed it in front of Madison without making a sound. "This is it?" she asked, looking at the bowl with a frown. "Yes, it's what you asked for. The fruit is cut too big. You know I don't like it like this. You should know that by now. Sorry, I'll cut it smaller." I took the bowl again and went back to the counter. My hands were shaking more now. I took out the cubes of fruit and cut them into smaller pieces, smaller, until they were almost crumbs. I put them back in the bowl and took it to her again. This time Madison said nothing. She just took a spoonful and started eating while she continued talking to Ryan in a low voice. I stayed by the stove, cleaning the dishes I had used. The hot water burned my hands, but I barely felt it. I was used to the pain. I had become an expert at enduring it. "Mom," Ryan said suddenly. I looked up. He was looking at me for the first time all morning. "Yes, son." End of quote. "Madison and I need to talk to you tonight, after dinner." My heart stopped for a second. Then it began to beat faster. "Did something happen?" "Nothing bad. We just need to talk about some things." "Okay." I lowered my gaze again. I finished washing the dishes and dried them one by one. Madison and Ryan continued talking to each other as if I wasn't there, as if I were invisible, as if I were just a shadow moving through the kitchen, doing what needed to be done. When they finished breakfast, they got up and left the kitchen without saying anything else. I heard them go up the stairs. I heard the door to their room close. And then, silence again. I was left alone in the kitchen. I looked at the clean dishes stacked in the drying rack. I looked at the empty table. I looked at my wrinkled red hands from the hot water. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something more than tiredness. I felt fear, a deep, cold fear that ran down my spine like a shiver, because I knew that when someone says, "We need to talk," it's never to tell you something good. The rest of the day passed in a thick fog. I cleaned the bathrooms. I vacuumed all the rooms. I did the laundry. I folded the sheets. I prepared lunch. I cleaned the kitchen again. I prepared dinner. My hands never stopped moving. But my mind was elsewhere. It was thinking about that conversation that was coming, about what Ryan and Madison wanted to tell me. As I peeled the potatoes for dinner, my thoughts traveled back in time. Back to the years when Ryan was just a child, a boy with big eyes and an easy smile who would run to me every time I came home from work. I remembered how he would hug my legs and tell me, "I missed you, Mommy," in that high, sweet voice that little children have. I worked in a textile factory back then, 10-hour shifts, sometimes 12. My husband Frank worked in construction. We both left before sunrise and came back after dark. But we always found time for Ryan, to help him with his homework, to play with him, to read him stories before bed. We didn't have much money. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house in a neighborhood where the streets weren't paved and stray dogs howled at night, but we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. We had enough to eat. We had clean clothes. We had love. And that seemed more than enough to me. When Ryan turned 15, something changed in him. He started to be ashamed of our house, of our neighborhood, of the clothes we wore. One day he came home from school and told me that his classmates made fun of him because his mother worked in a factory, because his father was a construction worker, because we didn't have a car, because we didn't go on vacation. I remember it broke my heart to hear him say that, but I didn't get angry with him. I just hugged him and told him that someday things would be different, that he would study, that he would have a good profession, that he would have everything we hadn't been able to have. And I kept that promise. Frank and I worked double. I took extra shifts at the factory. On weekends, I cleaned houses. Frank also worked on Sundays. Every dollar we earned, we saved. We lived on the bare minimum. We ate beans and rice almost every day. We didn't buy new clothes. We didn't go to the movies. We didn't go out to eat. Everything was for Ryan, for his education, for his future. When it was time for him to go to college, we had enough money saved to pay for the first semester. We got the rest with loans loans that Frank and I paid off for years. But it was worth it. Ryan studied business administration. He graduated with honors. He got a good job at a big company. He started earning more money in a month than we earned in 6. I was proud. So proud. Finally, my son had managed to get ahead. He had gotten what we never had. I thought all our sacrifice had been worth it. But then he met Madison. She worked at the same company. She came from a family with money. A lot of money. Her father owned several furniture stores in the city. Her mother had never worked a single day in her life. Madison had studied in private schools. She had traveled all over Latin America. She spoke English perfectly. She wore designer clothes. She drove a brand new car that her parents had given her when she turned 25. The first time Ryan introduced her to me, I knew she looked down on me. I saw it in her eyes, in the way she observed my old clothes, in how she wrinkled her nose when she entered our house, in the tone of voice she used when she greeted me. Polite but cold, correct but distant. Frank noticed it too. That night, after Ryan left with her, my husband told me, "That girl isn't for our son. She comes from another world. She won't understand where we come from." I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to think that Madison was just shy, that she needed time to get to know us, that the love between her and Ryan would be enough to overcome the differences. But Frank was right. He always was. Ryan and Madison got married a year later. The wedding was in an elegant ballroom that cost over $20,000. Madison's parents paid for everything. They barely consulted us about anything. I wore the only decent dress I had. Frank bought a used suit at a thrift store. We sat at a table in the back of the room. No one spoke to us. No one introduced us to the other guests. We were like ghosts at our own son's wedding. After the wedding, Ryan started visiting us less. First, once a week, then once every 2 weeks, then once a month. He always had excuses. He was busy with work. He had plans with Madison. He had meetings, commitments, important things to do. Frank got sick 2 years after the wedding. Lung cancer. The doctors said it was from all the years he had spent breathing cement dust and chemicals on construction sites. They gave him 6 months to live. I called Ryan to tell him. I thought he would come running, that he would be there for his father, but he only came to the hospital once. He stayed for 10 minutes. He said he had an important meeting and couldn't stay longer. He shook his father's hand. He told him, "You're going to be fine, Dad," in a voice that held no emotion, and he left. Frank died 3 months later. I was alone with him when it happened. I was holding his hand. I was softly singing a song we used to listen to when we were young. He opened his eyes for a moment. He looked at me. He tried to smile. And then he was gone. Ryan arrived at the funeral late, half an hour late. Madison didn't come. She said she had the flu and didn't want to infect anyone. Ryan stood alone during the service. After the burial, he hugged me for 2 seconds and told me he had to go, that he had things to do. After Frank's death, I stayed alone in our little house. The first few months were the hardest. Every corner reminded me of him. His chair in the living room, his coffee cup in the kitchen, his side of the bed, which was now empty and cold. Some nights I would wake up reaching for him, and when I didn't find him, the pain would break me in two all over again. But I kept going. Because that's what I had done my whole life. Kept going. I continued working at the factory, even though my knees already ached after standing for so many hours. I continued cleaning houses on the weekends, even though my back protested every time I bent over. I needed the money. The pension I received for Frank's death barely covered basic expenses. Ryan called me every once in a while. Short, superficial conversations. He would ask me how I was. I always answered that I was fine, even if it wasn't true. Even if some nights I cried myself to sleep. Even if the weight of loneliness was so great I could barely breathe. But I didn't tell him any of that, because I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want him to feel obligated to take care of me. One day, almost a year after Frank's funeral, Ryan showed up at my house unannounced. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the backyard washing clothes by hand because the washing machine had broken down and I didn't have money to fix it. I heard a knock on the door. I dried my hands on my apron and went to open it. There he was, my son. He was wearing a gray suit that looked expensive, shiny black shoes, his hair perfectly combed. He looked like a successful man, like someone who had achieved everything he set out to do. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger. "Hi, Mom," he said. "Son, what a surprise. Come in, come in." He entered the house and looked around. I saw his eyes land on the peeling walls, on the old sunken sofa, on the kitchen table that wobbled on one leg, on the curtains faded by the Sunday. I could see the judgment in his gaze, the shame, as if this house, the house where he had grown up, was now something to be ashamed of. "Do you want coffee? I just made some." "No, thanks. I can't stay long. I just came to talk to you about something important." My heart sped up a little. I dried my hands on my apron again, even though they were already dry. It was just a nervous gesture. "Okay, sit down." He sat on the edge of the sofa, as if he didn't want to touch the furniture too much. I sat in the chair across from him and waited. Ryan cleared his throat. He looked out the window. Then he looked at me. "Mom, Madison and I have been talking. We're worried about you living here alone. This house is very old. The neighborhood isn't safe, and you're working too much for your age." "I'm fine, son. Really, don't worry about me." "No, Mom, you're not fine. I saw your hands. They're red and chapped. I saw your back. You're walking hunched over. This can't go on." I stayed quiet, because he was right. My body was tired, very tired. But I didn't know what else to do. I had to work. I had to survive. "Madison and I have decided that you should come live with us." Those words took me by surprise. My eyes went wide. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Live with you?" "Yes. We have an extra room. You can stay there. You won't have to work anymore. You can rest. We'll take care of everything." I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been tight for a long time. My son was offering me a refuge, a place to rest, where I wouldn't have to worry about money, where I wouldn't have to get up before sunrise to go to work, where I could be close to him again. "I don't know what to say, son. That's very generous of you. But I don't want to be a bother. I don't want Madison to feel uncomfortable." "You won't be a bother, Mom. On the contrary, we'd like to have you close. Besides, the house is big. There's plenty of space." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe he really wanted me there, that he really cared about my well-being. But there was something in his tone of voice that didn't quite convince me, something rehearsed, as if he were repeating something he had practiced. "Are you sure? And Madison agrees?" "Completely. In fact, it was her idea." That surprised me even more. Madison had never treated me with much affection. She had always been polite but cold, distant. I couldn't imagine her suggesting that I move into her house. But maybe I had been wrong about her. Maybe behind that cold facade there was a good heart. Maybe she just needed time to open up. "Well, if you're sure, I would be very grateful." Ryan smiled. It was a quick smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perfect. I'll help you pack your things. You can move in next week." Everything happened very quickly after that. Ryan hired some men to come and pick up my few belongings, a bed, an old wardrobe, a few boxes with clothes and photographs. I didn't have much. A whole life fit in the back of a small truck. The day I left the house, I stood in the doorway looking back inside. I had lived there for more than 30 years. I had raised my son there. I had loved my husband there. I had cried there, laughed, suffered, dreamed. It was my home, the only home I had known as an adult. But now I had to let it go. I had to start over, in a different place, with people who, if I was honest with myself, I barely knew. Ryan and Madison's house was in a completely different neighborhood. Paved streets, perfectly manicured lawns, new cars parked in every driveway. It was the kind of neighborhood I used to dream about when Ryan was little. The kind of neighborhood I thought we could never reach. The house was large. 2 stories. A white facade with columns. A front yard with flowers and a cherry tree. Inside, it was even more impressive. Shiny hardwood floors. Modern furniture. A huge kitchen with stainless steel appliances that probably cost more than everything I had earned in a year. Madison greeted me at the door. She was wearing a beige dress, her hair perfectly styled. She gave me a quick hug. One of those hugs given out of courtesy, but with no real feeling behind it. "Welcome, Eleanor," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Madison. Thank you so much for having me in your home." "It's our home now," she said. "Well, come on, I'll show you your room." She led me up the stairs to the second floor. At the end of the hallway was a closed door. She opened it, and we went in. The room was small. The room was small, much smaller than any other room in the house. It had a single bed pushed against the wall, a narrow wardrobe, a small window that overlooked the backyard. The walls were painted white but looked stained in some parts. The floor was wood but was scratched and dull. There were no pictures, no decorations, nothing that made it feel like a home. "You can put your things in here," Madison said, pointing to the wardrobe. "The bathroom is at the end of the hall. You'll share it with us when we have guests, and they use the guest one." "Okay, thank you very much. There are some rules I need you to know from the beginning," she continued. Her tone had changed. It was no longer the polite tone from a few seconds ago. Now it was firm, direct. "I don't want you to go into our bedroom unless I ask you to. You can use the kitchen when you need to, but you must always clean everything up afterward. No leaving dirty dishes in the sink." I nodded. I was still trying to process everything, to understand that this small, empty room would be my new home. "Also," Madison continued, "we value our privacy very much. So if we're in the living room or any other part of the house and need to talk about something personal, I'd appreciate it if you'd retreat to your room." "Of course. And one more thing. We sometimes have guests, friends, colleagues from work. When that happens, we'd prefer if you stayed in your room. It's not that we don't want you with us, but, it's just more comfortable that way." Each word was like a small stab, but I kept smiling. I kept nodding, because I had learned to swallow the pain, to not show what I was feeling. "I understand." "Perfect. Then I think we'll get along just fine," Madison said. Her smile was back. That fake, cold smile. "I'll leave you to get settled. If you need anything, let us know." End of 60. She left the room and closed the door behind her. I was left alone in that small, silent space. I sat on the bed. The mattress was thin and hard. I looked around. My boxes were piled in a corner. My whole life inside 4 cardboard boxes. I took a deep breath. I told myself that everything would be fine, that I just needed time to adjust, that Ryan and Madison had opened their home to me, and I should be grateful, that this was better than being alone in my old little house, that here I would have food, a roof over my head, company. But deep down, very deep down, something told me I had made a mistake. The first few days were strange. I woke up early out of habit. I went down to the kitchen without making a noise. I made coffee. I sat at the table waiting for Ryan and Madison to wake up. When they came down, I had already prepared breakfast. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice. At first, Madison seemed happy. She thanked me. She said everything was delicious, but after a week, things started to change. "Eleanor, the eggs are overcooked. You know I like them softer." "Sorry, next time I'll cook them less." "And the coffee is too strong. How many scoops did you put in?" "The same as always." "Well, it's too strong. Use less." Every day there was something. Something that was wrong. Something I had done incorrectly. The fruit wasn't cold enough. The juice had too much pulp. The table wasn't set right. The silverware wasn't shiny enough. I just nodded. Apologized. Tried to do better the next time. But it was never enough. There was always something else to correct. Something else to criticize. After breakfast, Ryan would go to work. Madison would leave the house. She said she was going to the gym, or to meet friends, or to get her nails done. I would stay alone in the house. At first, I didn't know what to do with my time. I was used to working, to always being busy. So I started cleaning. I cleaned the kitchen after breakfast. I vacuumed the entire house. I dusted the furniture. I cleaned the bathrooms. I did the laundry. I ironed. I organized. I kept everything spotless. One afternoon, Madison came back from the gym and found me cleaning the living room. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I was cleaning," I thought. "You don't have to do that. We have a lady who comes twice a week to clean." "I know, but I have nothing else to do. And I want to help. I want to be useful." End of wording M. Madison looked at me for a moment. Then she shrugged. "Well, if you want to clean, go ahead. But make sure you do it right. The lady we have is very professional. She has high standards." I nodded. Of course she did. Everything in this house had high standards. The weeks passed, and slowly my role in the house became defined. I had become the one who did everything. I prepared breakfast. I cleaned the kitchen. I did the laundry. I ironed. I made the beds. I cleaned the bathrooms. I prepared lunch. I cleaned again. I prepared dinner. I cleaned one more time. Madison didn't thank me anymore. She simply expected everything to be done. And if something wasn't perfect, she let me know immediately. "Eleanor, the clothes aren't folded right. Look, the corners aren't even. Eleanor, there's dust on the top shelf. You didn't clean it. Eleanor, the food is too salty. How much salt did you put in it? Eleanor, the bathroom smells weird. Use more cleaning products." And 2. Ryan never said anything. When Madison criticized me, he just looked the other way. Sometimes he would leave the room. He never defended me. He never supported me. It was as if he had decided it was easier to be on his wife's side than on his mother's. One night, after washing the dinner dishes, I went up to my room. I sat on the bed and looked out the small window. It was dark outside. I could see some lights from the neighboring houses. I could hear the sound of the television coming from the living room downstairs. Laughter. Ryan and Madison were watching something together. I felt more alone in that moment than when I lived alone in my old house, because this was a different kind of loneliness. It was the loneliness of being surrounded by people but feeling invisible, of living in a big house but feeling homeless, of having family nearby but feeling abandoned. I thought about getting up, going downstairs, sitting with them in the living room, trying to be part of their life. But I remembered what Madison had said the first day, that when they were in the living room, I should stay in my room, that I should respect their privacy. So I stayed where I was, in my small room, on my hard bed, looking out my small window, feeling how every day I was becoming more and more invisible. 3 months passed since I moved into Ryan and Madison's house. 3 months in which my life had been reduced to a mechanical routine of cleaning, cooking, and obeying. 3 months in which I had ceased to be a person and had become a function. Something useful but not important. Necessary but not wanted. Madison's criticisms had become more frequent. She no longer waited for me to make a mistake. Now she looked for them. She inspected everything I did with eagle eyes. She ran her finger over the furniture looking for dust. She checked the clothes I ironed looking for wrinkles. She tasted the food before Ryan got home, and if something wasn't to her liking, she forced me to do it again. "This is bland. Make it again. The house smells old. Open the windows and use air freshener. I don't like how you folded the towels. Look at them. They look like a mess." I just nodded, apologized, redid it, over and over, until she was satisfied, until she found something else to criticize. One afternoon, Madison called me to the living room. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. I left everything and went immediately. She was sitting on the sofa with her legs crossed, looking at her phone. She didn't even look up when I came in. "I need you to go to the grocery store," she said without looking at me. "Of course. What do you need?" She handed me a list. It was long, very long. Tomatoes, lettuce, chicken, rice, pasta, sauce, bread, milk, yogurt, fruit, vegetables, cleaning products, toilet paper, napkins. The list went on and on. "Can you go now? I need everything to be here before Ryan gets back." I looked at the clock. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Ryan arrived at 7. I would have to hurry. "Yes, I'll go right now. Here's the money," she said, handing me some bills. I counted them quickly. $150. "And Eleanor," she added, finally looking up from her phone. "Bring me the receipt. I want to see what you spent every cent on." I nodded. I took the money and the list. I left the house and walked to the bus stop. It was hot. The sun was still high in the sky. I waited 20 minutes until the bus arrived. I got on. I paid my fare. I sat by the window and watched the city go by in front of me. I had stopped driving years ago. I couldn't afford the maintenance of a car, or the gas, or the insurance. So I had gotten used to public transport, to the slow, crowded buses, to the waits under the sun or in the rain. It was part of my life, part of who I was. I arrived at the grocery store 40 minutes later. I took a cart and began to go through the aisles, following Madison's list. Every product had to be exactly as she wanted it. Tomatoes that were very red but not too ripe. Fresh lettuce, but not romaine. Skinless chicken. Brown rice, not white. Gluten-free bread, skim milk, sugar-free Greek yogurt. It took me over an hour to find everything. My feet hurt. My back too, but I kept going. When I finished, I went to the checkout. The cashier scanned each product. The total was $148.70. I handed her the bills. She gave me back $1.30. I put the receipt in my pocket. The way back was even harder. The bags were heavy. My arms trembled from the effort. I had to make 2 trips from the bus stop to the house because I couldn't carry everything at once. When I finally got inside, it was 7:15. Ryan had already arrived. He was sitting in the living room with Madison. They both looked at me when I came in with the bags. "You're late," Madison said. "I'm sorry, the bus was delayed, and there were a lot of people at the supermarket. Ryan is hungry. You need to prepare dinner quickly." "Yes, right away." I took the bags to the kitchen and began to put everything away. My hands moved quickly. I opened the refrigerator. I put away the milk, the yogurt, the vegetables, the chicken. I closed the refrigerator. I opened the pantry. I put away the rice, the pasta, the cans. I closed the pantry. I put the cleaning products under the sink. Then I started cooking. I put water on to boil for the pasta. I took out the chicken and seasoned it. I put it in the oven. I washed the lettuce. I cut the tomatoes. I prepared a salad. Meanwhile, I watched the pasta. I took it out when it was ready. I drained it. I added sauce. The chicken came out of the oven. I cut it into pieces. I put everything on plates. I took it to the dining room. Ryan and Madison were already seated, waiting. I put the plates in front of them. I was about to go back to the kitchen when Madison spoke. "And your plate?" "I'll eat later, when I finish cleaning up." "No, sit down. Eat now." I was surprised. Normally, I ate alone in the kitchen after they finished, but I didn't question it. I served myself a small plate and sat in the chair at the other end of the table. We ate in silence, or rather, they ate in silence while talking to each other. I just moved the food around on my plate. My stomach was in knots. The stress of the day had taken away my appetite. "Eleanor?" Madison said suddenly. I looked up. She was looking at me with a serious expression. "Ryan and I have been talking. There's something we need to discuss with you." My heart sped up. Those words. Again. The last time I had heard them was when Ryan offered to have me move in. And now, 3 months later, I was hearing them again. And from Madison's tone, I knew it wouldn't be anything good. "Of course, tell me." Madison looked at Ryan. He cleared his throat. He looked uncomfortable. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he began, "we've noticed that the house is big. Too big for the 3 of us. And with all the expenses we have, well, money is a bit tight." End of quote. I stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue, knowing the worst was yet to come. Madison and I were thinking that maybe we could rent out one of the rooms, the one on the first floor, the one next to the kitchen. It's a good room, spacious, with its own bathroom. We could get good tenants, students or young professionals, and the extra money would really help us out. "I understand," I said slowly. "And what does that have to do with me?" Madison took control of the conversation. "Well, Eleanor, the thing is, if we're going to have tenants, we need the house to be spotless all the time, not just clean, but perfect. They're going to be paying $800 a month, so they'll expect everything to be in order. I can take care of that. I can clean more. I can." "It's not just that," she interrupted. "We also need you to cook for them. Breakfast and dinner. Nothing too elaborate, just the basics. and do their laundry, and keep their room clean. Hem. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. They were going to rent a room. They were going to receive $800 a month, and I was going to be the one to do all the work. The one to clean. The one to cook. The one to wash the clothes. The one to serve. And will I receive some of that money? I asked. My voice sounded smaller than I would have liked. Madison laughed. It was a short, cold laugh. Eleanor, you live here for free. You don't pay rent. You don't pay for food. You don't pay utilities. You're already receiving plenty. Madison's words hung in the air like a sentence. I stared at my plate. The food I had prepared with my own hands now tasted like ashes in my mouth. I wanted to say something. I wanted to remind them that I wasn't there for free, that I worked from sunup to sundown, that I cleaned their house, that I cooked their food, that I washed their clothes, that I had given up my own home, my own life, to be there. But the words wouldn't come out. They got stuck in my throat, along with the pain and the humiliation. Do you understand, Mom? Ryan asked. His voice sounded almost pleading, as if he needed my approval, as if that would make it all easier for him. Yes, I whispered. I understand. Perfect, Madison said, getting up from the table. The tenants arrive on Monday, so you have the weekend to prepare the room. I need you to deep clean it, change the sheets, put out new towels, make everything shine. She left the room without waiting for a reply. Hilario stayed a moment longer. He looked at me with something that looked like guilt in his eyes. But then he also got up and left. I was left alone in the dining room, with the dirty plates in front of me, and a weight in my chest that barely let me breathe. I spent the weekend preparing the room. I cleaned every corner. I washed the windows until they sparkled. I vacuumed the carpet 3 times. I scrubbed the bathroom so hard my hands were red and raw. I put clean sheets on the bed, fresh towels in the bathroom. I placed fresh flowers on the nightstand. Everything had to be perfect, because if anything was wrong, I knew Madison would let me know. On Monday morning, the tenants arrived. They were 2 young women, college students. One was named Jessica, and the other was Lauren. They were 22 years old. They had long, shiny hair, modern clothes, easy smiles. They were the kind of girls I had wanted to be when I was young but never could. Madison showed them the house. She laid out the rules. She showed them their room. They smiled and said everything was perfect, that they were very happy to be there. Then Madison pointed at me. This is Eleanor. She will be handling your cooking and keeping everything clean. If you need anything, you can ask her. The girls looked at me. They smiled politely. I smiled back, even though it hurt. Because in their eyes, I saw the same thing I had seen in Madison's eyes the first day. I wasn't a person to them. I was a service, a function, something that was included in the $800 they paid each month. From that day on, my routine became even heavier. Now I had to get up an hour earlier to prepare breakfast for 5 people. Ryan wanted eggs and toast. Madison wanted fruit and yogurt. Jessica wanted oatmeal with honey. Lauren wanted pancakes with syrup. Everything had to be ready at the same time. Everything had to be hot. Everything had to be perfect. After breakfast came the cleaning. Now there were more plates, more cups, more silverware, more surfaces to clean. And after the kitchen, I had to clean the whole house. The living room, the dining room, the bathrooms, the bedrooms. Wash clothes for 5 people. Iron them, fold them, put them away. In the afternoon, I had to go to the grocery store. Now the list was twice as long. Food for 5 people cost a lot more. Madison gave me $250 each week, and every week I had to bring back the receipt. I had to justify every cent. If I went over by even $1, she would complain. If I had anything left over, she would take it from me. She never let me keep it. And then came dinner. I had to cook different dishes because everyone had different preferences. Ryan wanted steak. Madison wanted fish. Jessica was a vegetarian. Lauren was gluten-free. I had to juggle in the kitchen to satisfy everyone. And when I finished, when everyone had finally eaten, I was left with the scraps, with what no one wanted, with what was left in the pots. I ate standing up in the kitchen, quickly, because I still had to wash all the dishes, clean the kitchen, leave it spotless for the next day. By the time I finished everything, it was already midnight. I would go up to my room with swollen feet and a shattered back. I would collapse onto the bed without even changing my clothes. I would close my eyes, and before I could even take a peaceful breath, it was morning again. And it all started over. The weeks turned into a month, then 2, then 3. I had ceased to be Eleanor Torres. I had ceased to be the woman who once had dreams and hopes. Now I was just a pair of hands that cleaned, a back that carried, a voice that said yes to everything, a shadow that moved through the house without making a noise, without bothering anyone, without really existing. Madison didn't even speak to me directly most of the time anymore. She left me notes, in the kitchen, in my room, on the refrigerator, notes with orders, with lists, with complaints. Last night's dinner was cold. Make sure it's hot. Jessica says her towel wasn't in its place. Don't forget again. I need you to clean the oven. It's dirty. The downstairs bathroom smells bad. Use more bleach. End quote. Each note was a reminder that I wasn't enough. That no matter how hard I worked, no matter how hard I tried, it would never be enough. Ryan didn't talk to me anymore either. When we passed each other in the house, he would look the other way. Sometimes I tried to start a conversation. I'd ask him how his day was. He would answer with monosyllables. Fine, busy, tired. And then he would walk away, as if being near me was uncomfortable for him, as if I were a reminder of something he wanted to forget. The girls, Jessica and Lauren, had been polite at first. They would greet me when they saw me. They would say thank you when I served them food. But over time, that changed too. Now they only saw me when they needed something, when the food wasn't on time, when their clothes weren't ready, when something wasn't as they wanted it. One night, Jessica left her clothes thrown on the bathroom floor, dirty clothes mixed with wet towels. I picked them up, just as I had picked up everything else for months. I washed them, dried them, folded them. I left them in her room. The next day she found me in the kitchen. Eleanor, my white sweater shrank, the one I left in the bathroom. I'm sorry. Maybe the water was too hot. Well, that sweater cost me $60. I expect you to replace it. I stared at her. She was 22 years old. I was 63. She had her whole life ahead of her. I could barely stay on my feet, and she was demanding that I pay her $60 for a sweater that she had left thrown on the floor. I don't have any money, I said simply. Well, get it, because I'm not going to lose my sweater because of your carelessness. She left the kitchen. I just stood there, feeling something inside me break a little more. Something that was already so broken, I didn't know how it could break anymore. But there was always more. Always another crack, another wound, another piece of me that broke off and disappeared. I couldn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling of my small room. The darkness surrounded me, but it didn't bring me peace. Only more thoughts, more pain, more unanswered questions. How had I gotten here? At what point had I lost control of my own life? When had I stopped being a person and become this? I thought about Frank, about how he would have defended me, how he would have never allowed our son to treat me this way. I thought about how I had failed him, how I had raised a man who was capable of watching his own mother suffer and doing nothing, how all my sacrifices had ended in this. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I finally got up. There was no point in trying to sleep. I went down to the kitchen and started to work. Madison had left a note the day before, saying she was having a gathering with her friends on Friday, that she needed me to prepare food for 12 people. Finger sandwiches, mini quiches, cakes, drinks. Everything had to be ready by 6 o'clock in the evening. Today was Friday, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning. I had 14 hours to prepare everything. I took out the flour, the eggs, the meat, the vegetables. I turned on the oven. My hands moved from memory. I mixed. I cut. I filled. I baked, one after another. Dozens of mini quiches. While the oven worked, I prepared the finger sandwiches. Bread, ham, cheese, lettuce, tomato. I cut them into perfect triangles. I covered them with plastic wrap. The hours passed. At 7, Ryan came down. He saw me in the kitchen surrounded by trays and dishes. "What are you doing up so early?" Preparing food for Madison's party. Ah, right, that. He poured himself coffee. He left. At 8, Madison came down. She inspected everything I had done so far. She took a mini quiche. She broke it open. She smelled it. She took a small bite. It needs more salt, she said, and the filling is too dry. Ed Grease. I had made 40 quiches. 40. And she was telling me they all needed more salt and the filling was dry. Do you want me to make them again? I asked in a tired voice. There's no time. Just make sure the rest of the food is better. She left. I just stared at the quiches. All those hours of work. And nothing was ever enough. I continued cooking. I baked cakes. 1 chocolate, 1 vanilla, 1 carrot. I decorated them carefully. I made punch, lemonade, coffee. I washed glasses, plates, cloth napkins that I had to iron one by one. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, everything was ready. The house was spotless. The food was on the dining room table. Everything perfectly arranged. Everything ready for Madison's guests. Very good, she said, inspecting everything. Now go to your room. My friends will be here soon, and I don't want you wandering around. What if they need something? I'll call you if necessary. But I'd prefer if you didn't come down. I nodded. I went up to my room. I sat on the bed. I heard the guests start to arrive. Laughter, cheerful voices, music. The sound of the party filled the house. I was upstairs, in silence, invisible. The hours passed. From my window, I watched it get dark outside. I heard the party continue downstairs. More laughter, more music, sometimes shouts of joy. They were enjoying the food I had prepared. They were using the plates I had washed. They were dirtying the house I would have to clean. At 11 o'clock at night, I heard the guests leaving. One by one, goodbyes, more laughter. Car doors slamming, engines driving away. Then I heard Madison's footsteps coming up the stairs. I heard her bedroom door close. I waited. I thought maybe she would call me to come down and clean. But she didn't. So I waited longer. At midnight, I went downstairs. The house was a disaster. Glasses everywhere. Dirty plates. Crumpled napkins on the floor. Spilled food on the table. Stains on the sofa. And on the carpet, right in the center, was a large, dark stain of red wine. I took a deep breath. I went to get my cleaning tools. The bucket. The rags. The detergent. I knelt in front of the carpet. The cold water burned my chapped hands. My knees protested against the hard floor. But I kept scrubbing. 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 I cleaned until 3 o'clock in the morning. Every plate, every glass, every surface. I left everything spotless. Then I went up to my room. I collapsed onto the bed. I closed my eyes. I felt the exhaustion pulling me down into a dark, deep place. But I had barely closed my eyes when I heard a noise. Footsteps. Someone going down the stairs. Then silence. Then more footsteps. Coming up this time. Approaching my room. The door burst open. Not with a hand. With a foot. A sharp kick that made the wooden frame tremble. My eyes snapped open. My heart leaped. Madison was there. In the doorway. Her face red with rage. Her hair loose. Her eyes bright with fury. "And so what if you cooked all night for my guests?" she screamed. Her voice filled the small room. "Were you expecting a medal? You're tired." As if it was so hard to cook all night for my guests. And now, breakfast isn't even ready. I sat up slowly. My entire body ached. Every muscle, every bone. I had slept for only 2 hours in the last 48. I had worked non-stop, and she was here, screaming at me, accusing me, humiliating me. "Madison, I just lay down." I thought, "I'm not interested in what you thought. Get up right now and make breakfast. Ryan will be waking up soon, and I'm not going to tell him there's nothing ready because his mother decided to sleep in." Her screams echoed in the walls. I felt something snap inside me, something that had been holding on for months. For all this time, all the humiliations, all the criticisms, all the contempt, all the pain, it all built up in that moment. In that second, in that small room at 6 o'clock in the morning, Madison, what's wrong? Why are you screaming like this? It was Ryan. He had woken up from his wife's screams. He was in the hallway. His voice sounded confused, scared almost. Your mother, Madison screamed, spinning towards him. Your mother is what's wrong. She's in here, lying in bed, as if she has no responsibilities, as if she doesn't have to work. And I can't take it anymore. Ryan walked into my room. He looked at me. Then he looked at Madison. His face showed confusion. But also something else. Something that broke my heart. Because in his eyes, I saw no defense, no protection, no love. I saw calculation. I saw consideration. I saw a man deciding which side to be on. And he chose. Mom, he said, his voice tense. Maybe Madison is right. You have been very slow lately, and if you're going to live here, you have to pull your weight. Those words, those damned words, they came from my son, from the boy I had held in my arms, the boy I had fed when I didn't even have money for myself, the boy I had worked for until I destroyed my body, the boy who was now standing in front of me, telling me I had to pull my weight. Something inside me died in that moment. Something that had been clinging to the hope that things would change, that my son would remember who I was, that he would go back to being the boy who loved me. But that boy didn't exist anymore, and the man standing in front of me was a stranger. I got up from the bed, slowly. My legs were trembling, but they held me. I looked at Madison, then I looked at Ryan. They were both watching me, expecting me to lower my head like always, to apologize like always, to obey like always. But this time was different. No, I said. My voice sounded strange, firm, as if it were coming from someone else. What? Madison asked. Her face showed disbelief. I said no. I'm not going down to make breakfast. I'm not going to keep doing this. Madison laughed. It was a high-pitched, scornful laugh. Oh, really? And what do you plan to do? Where are you going to go? You have nothing, Eleanor. You have no house. You have no money. You have nothing. She was right. I had nothing. I had sold my house to pay Frank's medical debts. I had no savings. I had no job. I had nowhere to go. But in that moment, I realized something. I had something they could never take away from me. I had my dignity, and if I stayed one more day in that house, I would lose it forever. You're right, I said, looking her directly in the eyes. I have nothing. But I would rather have nothing than keep living like this. I would rather sleep on the street than continue to be treated like trash in my own son's house. Mom, wait, Ryan said. Now his voice sounded nervous, as if he finally realized that something had changed, that he had crossed a line from which there was no return. No, I said, turning to him. I don't want to hear any more. For months, I've stayed silent. I've endured. I've obeyed. I've done everything you asked. I've worked until I destroyed my body. And never, not once, did you thank me. You never defended me. You never protected me. You let your wife humiliate me time and time again while you looked the other way. I didn't know you felt that way. Yes, you did. You just didn't care. A minute. I opened the wardrobe. I pulled out my only suitcase. The same one I had arrived with months ago. I started packing my clothes. I didn't have much. A few old dresses, worn-out underwear, a sweater Frank had given me years ago, a photograph of the two of us in our house. That was it. My whole life fit in one small suitcase. What are you doing? Madison asked. Now her voice sounded different, less certain, as if she finally understood I wasn't playing. I'm leaving. Don't be ridiculous. Where are you going to go at 6 o'clock in the morning? Anywhere. Anywhere but here. I closed the suitcase. I picked it up with one hand. I walked toward the door. Ryan was blocking the path. He looked at me. I saw fear in his eyes. Fear that I would really leave. Fear of what that would mean for him, for his image, for his conscience. Mom, please, don't do this. We can talk. We can fix things. There's nothing left to fix, son. You broke everything. And I can't stay and look at the pieces. I moved to the side. He didn't stop me. I walked down the stairs. I crossed the living room I had cleaned hundreds of times. I passed by the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals. I opened the front door. The cold morning air hit my face. But it felt good. It felt like freedom. I heard footsteps behind me. Ryan had come down. Mom, wait. At least tell me where you're going. At least let me help you. I turned toward him. I looked at him one last time. I saw the man he had become. And I felt something like sadness, but I also felt relief, because I was finally letting go of the illusion that things would go back to how they were, that he would go back to being my son. I don't need your help, Ryan. What I needed was your love, your respect, your loyalty, but you never gave them to me. So now, I don't need anything from you. I walked down the street. The suitcase was heavy, but my steps were light. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The sun was beginning to rise. The sky was turning orange and pink. The streets were empty. There was only me, my suitcase, and an uncertain future. I walked aimlessly for hours. My feet hurt, but I didn't stop. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that every step was taking me further away from that hell. I passed by a park. I sat on a bench. I took out the photograph of Frank and me. I looked at him, his smile, his kind eyes. I'm sorry, I told him in a low voice. I'm sorry I raised a son who wouldn't have made you proud. But I can't keep paying for that mistake. I can't keep sacrificing myself for someone who doesn't value me. I put the photograph away. I took a deep breath. And in that moment, I made a decision. I was going to survive. I was going to find a way. Because I had survived worse things. I had survived poverty, the death of my husband, the abandonment of my son, and I would survive this too. The days passed. I found a shelter for older women. They gave me a bed, food, a safe place to stay while I looked for work. I got a job cleaning a diner in the mornings. It didn't pay much, only $300 a week, but it was enough. It was honest, and it was mine. After 3 months, I saved enough to rent a small room. It was modest. It had a bed, a table, a chair, a shared bathroom at the end of the hall, but it was mine. No one yelled at me. No one humiliated me. No one treated me like trash. I made friends in the building, women like me, women who had lost everything but were still going. We met on Sundays for coffee, to share stories, to laugh at our scars. One afternoon, 6 months after I had left, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering, but something told me to do it. Mom? It was Ryan. His voice sounded broken, tired. Mom, I need to talk to you. What do you want, Ryan? Things haven't been good. Madison and I, we're getting divorced. She left, she took everything. I'm alone, and I need. You need what? Silence. Then I heard something that sounded like a sob. I need you. I need my mom. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, please forgive me. I closed my eyes. I felt the weight of his words, the pain in his voice. Part of me wanted to run to him, to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, because that's how it had always been. Me forgiving, me sacrificing, me putting his needs before my own. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Ryan, I said, my voice calm. I wish you the best. I really do. I hope you find peace. I hope you learn from your mistakes. But I can't be part of your life anymore. I can't be the one to rescue you from the consequences of your decisions. But Mom, no, listen to me. It took me 63 years to understand something very simple. Nobody deserves to live where they aren't valued. Nobody deserves to sacrifice their dignity for love. And nobody, absolutely nobody, has the right to treat you as if you are less than what you are. Please, take care of yourself, son. And I hope one day you understand that real love doesn't humiliate. It doesn't destroy. It doesn't take everything without giving anything in return. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking. Tears were running down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of closure, of peace. I sat by the window of my small room. I looked outside. The sun was setting. The sky was painted in colors that reminded me of the sunrise on the day I left. I smiled. For the first time in years, I truly smiled. Because I had finally understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to stay and endure. It's to leave. It's to choose yourself. It's to say, enough. And to walk forward without looking back.